Now, in 14 years' time, you should be able to travel from Birmingham to London in under 50 minutes. That's because the Transport Secretary, Justine Greening, who says she's following in the footsteps of Victorian railway pioneers, has given the high-speed rail link the green light. The government says the whole project will cost over £32 billion and deliver economic benefits worth £44 billion. But the claims have been hotly disputed by opponents of the link. One of those opponents is Martin Tett, leader of Buckinghamshire County Council, and he joins me now from Great Missenden in the Chiltern Hills, one of the areas likely to be affected by the high-speed rail line. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, as we said, you're leader of Buckinghamshire County Council. Are you going to take Justine Greening to court over her decision to give HS2 the go-ahead?
Hi there, Joe. Good afternoon to you all.
Hello.
I think before you get on to issues about taking anyone to court, I mean, we're obviously going to look at the decision, read it, and actually understand the detail. But we're used as local authorities to taking controversial, difficult decisions. And if there was a really good business case behind this, I don't think we'd find too many grounds for opposing it. But the problem is both our experts and virtually every independent analyst who've looked at this all agree this is a fundamentally flawed business case that just doesn't deliver good value for money in terms of what's going to be, we think, well in excess of £32 billion worth of public expenditure. I mean, at a time of austerity, we really have to make sure that this is well justified.
OK.
And I mean, I heard Andrew Adonis on the radio this morning, and sorry, just let me make this point. You know, the whole business case rests on the fact that every minute spent by a businessman on a train is wasted. And as you and Andrew Neil have said in the past, that just doesn't stack up in an era of iPods and iPhones and mobile phones. It's a flawed business case, and there are much better alternatives.
Right, well, we're going to ask Andrew Adonis in just a moment because he's here in the studio. But can I come back to that point? It sounds as if you are planning to go to court over this decision.
No, I didn't say that with respect, Joe. What we're going to do is we're going to listen to what's been said, we're going to read the decision, we're going to take advice from both legal and technical experts. And a lot will depend on the detail. I mean, for example, there were 55,000 respondents to this public consultation that was carried out. What were the results of that public consultation? The government places a lot of store by localism and listening to people. What was said by those people? Where is that within the document that's been published today? Because we'd like to see how the government's responded to those concerns.
Well, I mean, the government would say, of course, they've listened to your concerns. They've delayed this announcement.
What, by about a month?
Well,
I don't think that's really listening to our concerns.
So you don't.
I mean, there's a fundamental issue as well. Again, Andrew this morning was arguing there is no alternative to this. Now, if the business case falls away, if you don't accept that people don't work on trains, the only other argument is about capacity. And actually, we've shown very robustly that you can meet all of the capacity growth that's required by upgrading the existing line. And this is not a patch and mend. This is a much less expensive, much more good value for money use of public money upgrading the existing line. And also then you can invest in the road and rail infrastructure around the entire country, in the northeast, in the north of England, in Wales, Scotland, the southwest, which is what we really need now if we're going to generate jobs and economic growth.
Just stay with us, Martin Tett. Andrew Adonis, who is now joining us, now former Labour Transport Secretary, announced the original plans for a second high-speed rail line. The business case just doesn't stack up.
Can I first of all say that
Yes.
I completely understand what Martin is saying on behalf of Buckinghamshire.
Yes.
The international rule of high-speed rail is that everyone wants the stations and no one wants the line. Unfortunately, the line has got to go somewhere, so it's no surprise that in defence of the NIMBYs of the Chilterns, Martin is there saying that he opposes it.
But he says he's opposing it on the business case, so let's concentrate on the business case. Is there, he's saying it doesn't stack up, that the amount of money that would be made from a business point of view wouldn't be as great as the government says?
The facts are very clear. To provide 2/3 of the capacity which HS2 provides, 2/3 would cost more in cash terms than building HS2, and it is inconceivable that we will not need that capacity over the next generation. So we face a choice. You can do patch and mend. It may be you can get through the next 10, the next 15 years by having longer trains, by doing some changes to some of the pinch points on the network and so on. But if you're going to put right this issue of capacity between the two largest conurbations in England, London and the West Midlands, over the next generation, you have two choices. You either do a repeat of the 10 billion upgrade of the West Coast Main Line, which produced chronic disruption for 10 years and still didn't sort out the capacity demands that are going to be required over the next generation, or you do what every other developed country in Europe and Asia is doing, which is to build state-of-the-art infrastructure to modern technology, which will actually put in place the infrastructure and the capacity that's required for the next generation.
Jon, let's take the capacity issue first of all. I mean, that is a fairly strong case there by Andrew Adonis, that actually just purely looking at capacity, there is a sealed case for HS2 to go ahead, because patch men will cost a fortune.
Well, knowing what's coming on here, I've read all this stuff.
Glad you have.
I don't find the arguments about the capacity at all compelling at the moment. First class runs at 20% occupancy. The projections for future passenger volumes are desperately uncertain. This has been evaluated over a 60-year period. Even the birth rate of the populations are variable over that period. It looks to me like, on reasonable assumptions, you'd get through at least 20 years without going to the HS2 route.
Well, but that exactly is the patch and mend argument. At least 20 years, but we're going to have to do something significant in that period. So what you'll have is your first big patch and mend will take place in at least 20 years. I suspect it'll end up being more than one over that period. We don't need to look at the crystal ball here. We have just spent £10 billion upgrading the West Coast Main Line to deal with pinch points, to make it possible to run longer trains. It was also supposed to make it possible to have faster running, but that didn't prove possible because you're doing open heart surgery on a Victorian railway. So the 140-mile-an-hour running that was supposed to be part of the last upgrade of the West Coast Main Line wasn't possible. We'll be doing exactly the same if we go down this patch and mend route.
But you're guessing, Andrew, as to 20 years out on volume. If you look at the any other government's histories on guessing electrical power requirements in 20 years, anything about the volumes on the motorways or whatever, they're always out by a bloody mile. This is a lot of money.
They tend to underestimate it.
Can I just ask you one thing,
on this point? What do they tend
to
get wrong? They tend to underestimate it. What we can be sure of is that just one patch and mend, if it's like the modernisation of the West Coast Main Line, will cost many billions of pounds. That's before you get to any of the additional requirements that are going to be needed.
Let's just briefly look at it politically. Do you really feel in your heart of heart that it's actually going to be built? Yes or no?
It will be built.
You will be built.
The question is whether it's built in the 2020s or the 2030s or the 2040s. It would be a good idea if we got there sooner rather than later.
All right, Andrew Adonis, thank you.